Let me go ahead and introduce today's presenters. Again, my name is Phil Winters. I'm the moderator for today. I'm the director of the TDM program. Our two presenters today are Dr. Ed Hilsman, who's joined Qatar in 2008 after working 19 years at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and nearly 10 years for the Washington State Department of Transportation. He has broad experience in transportation energy use and demand management, energy conservation, human technology interactions, climate change, and evaluation. His interests are in broadening the scope of transportation demand management as a tool for reducing emissions of greenhouse gases and responding to higher fuel costs. He has served as a member of TRB's Committee on TDM, Transportation Energy, Travel Survey Methods, Telecommunications, and Travel Behavior. He's earned his BA in Geography from Miami University in Ohio and his MA and PhD in Geography from the University of Iowa. Sean Barbeau joined the research faculty in 2004. He has led multiple research projects investigating intelligent software systems for global positioning system enabled mobile phones, including a travel assistance device, TAD, a mobile phone application which provides real-time navigation instructions to public transportation riders with disabilities. Sean has served on a member of the International Expert Group, which developed a Java-based software standard for location-aware mobile phones and has 15 patents pending in the area of location-aware technology. He holds both MS and BS degrees in computer science from USF and is currently a part-time computer science PhD student here at USF. And with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters today to talk about enhancing livability in your community. Okay, Sean?
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks. This is Ed Hilsman, and I'm going to cover roughly the first half of the presentation today, and then turn things over to Sean for the second half. What we want to do today is advise you on an emerging technology called multimodal trip planning. And we want to discuss its role in supporting livable communities and give you talk about a few possible applications, and get you thinking about this so that you can begin, if you're interested, to prepare for setting up such a system in your community. Okay, that was the poll question we did. One element of livability is having multiple travel options for getting around so that you're not car dependent or walk dependent or bus dependent or bike dependent, but you have choices among modes and you have choices among destinations, and you can mix and match modes and destinations to meet whatever needs that you have. Why are we interested in multimodal trip planners? Well, if you want to drive somewhere, the real question is just simply, how do I get there? The road networks are pretty dense in the U.S. and connected and complete, and there's a number of online services such as Google or MapQuest or Yahoo that if you point and click on a map, or if you type in an address and your location for where you're starting, they can tell you how to drive there. If you want to take a trip by bicycle or by foot or by bus, the first real question in a lot of American cities is, can I get there? Not how do I get there, but can I get there by this mode? And can I do it by a safe route? And then secondarily, okay, now that we've established that, how do I get there? The problem with networks with using these other modes in a lot of U.S. cities is that the networks are sparse, or they're incomplete, or both. And information about specific details of part of the route may be more important for taking transit or walking or biking than comparable level of detail for driving. So to show you an example here, this is from the north area of northern part of the Tampa metropolitan area. The University of South Florida is sort of in the right center of this. And the red lines on this show bus routes. And as you can see, there's some areas to the left-hand side which have reasonably connected street networks and little or no bus service. This is the same area, and it's been drawn to show bicycle lanes. And so the streets that are showing with blue margins, such as the one that's being highlighted now, have bike lanes or bike shoulders on them. What you don't see from this is that there are in fact a lot of very nice, pleasantly bikeable streets that you can ride a bicycle on and feel reasonably safe. They don't show up on this map because they don't have bike lanes. And if you were to visit this area, you wouldn't really know about those. And this is part of why having a multimodal trip planner or something that can give you information about other modes is useful, because right now you look at this map and all you see are a bunch of streets, some of which have bike lanes. We distinguish between two types of trip planning. One is unimodal, and this is what Google Maps does, or Google Transit, or Google Bikes, or Yahoo Maps, or MapQuest, or some of the others. And what they let you do is that you choose an origin and you choose a destination for the trip, and you choose a mode, and you get a trip by car, or a trip by bus, or by walk, or by walking, or by bicycle. A multimodal trip planner has options so that you can mix modes for a trip, so that if you want to bike to your nearest transit stop, ride the bus, and then either bike or walk to your final destination, you could plan that entire trip with one request in a multimodal trip planner. Or you could drive or bike to a park and ride lot and take the bus, or meet a van pool there. You might need a wheelchair accessible route to or from transit, or various access to or from bike sharing or car sharing options. So I want to go to our next poll question here, and that'll come up in just a bit. Have you used Google Transit or Google Bikes? And we've got options here so that you can check that you've used one or the other or both or neither. Okay. We'll give this another few seconds here, and we'll go ahead and close it. And it looks like about 40% of you have used Google Transit. 2% or only one of you has actually used Google Bikes and not used Google Transit. If we count people who've used both, then we've got about 60% who've used Google Transit and about 20% who've used Google Bikes. And then we have roughly a third who have not used either one of them. About half of those are aware of them, and the other half are not aware of them. So, okay, let's go back to the presentation. Okay. Looking at trip planning software, if you want to build your own trip planning software and feed it with the data that you need to make it run, that can get pretty expensive. There was a project that developed a multimodal trip planner in Chicago that cost more than $1 million, and it's still being worked on. It's a nice system, but you know, $1 million is a lot of money. The common unimodal trip planners that we mentioned earlier with Google and Yahoo, they're free. They're available to anybody on the web, but the services that they provide depend on the needs and the desires of Google and Yahoo and so forth. If you want to do something different, like if you want a multimodal trip planner, you're going to have to wait for them to decide that it's something that they want to do. The other thing is that they provide, even though they provide these trip planners for free to people, they do put limits on the use and how the systems are presented. If you want, it's technically possible to write software that will run an awful lot of pairs of origins and destinations through Google Transit or Google Maps, but it violates what they call their terms of service for providing the trip planning service. So they don't want you to do that for a number of reasons. An alternative is something that work began on this in 2009. It's an open source software project called Open Trip Planner. And it was spearheaded by TriMet, which is the public transportation agency in Portland. They got grant funding to start this, and they have managed to, through all of this, create an active worldwide developers group. This is open source. It means anybody who wants to can go to their website and they can download the software, they can install it, they can modify it. If they want, they can contribute improvements back to the project. Improvements do get reviewed before they're incorporated into the project. And a nonprofit organization called Open Plans has developed in parallel, and it can provide technical support for installing the software, customizing it, and maintaining it. It's the same sort of arrangement that the Red Hat company provides in terms of support for Linux, which is another large open source software project. And as I said, this really started about a little over 2 years ago. Open Trip Planner is a true multimodal trip planner. What we've done here is in the next several slides, we've put together some illustrations of routes that it's found for us, centered on the University of South Florida area. So if you look at the right-hand corner of this, the left-hand corner of this, you'll see a bike trip that's starting, and it meanders, south and east until it gets over to a shopping mall, and then it takes a bus, and it takes a bus from there over to the University of South Florida campus, and that happens to be where Qatar is. And then you get off the bus and you walk some distance down to your destination. And this was all done with simply requesting the origin from the green where the bicycle is and the red where the dot is. I want to mention that we've put up a demonstration version of Open Trip Planner, and we've put the URL here on the slide. And after the talk, if you want, feel free to go to that website, and you can request trips. It is a test site, and you can do things that will break it, but you can get a feel for how it works. And you won't break it permanently. You just get some strange results sometimes. It is designed so that it can, Open Trip Planner is designed so that it will actually interline between different bus systems. So we've set this up. We have the main public transportation agency for the Tampa area called HART, Hillsborough Area Regional Transit. And the university also has its own bus shuttle system, which is not unusual for a large university. And you can request a route, again, going from the green by walking, and you can catch a HART bus, which will take you down to where you can catch a a Bull Runner bus, that's the university shuttle, and then the Bull Runner will take you over to the university campus, and then you can get off and walk to your destination. So again, moving from the green point to the red point. So the question we get from a lot of people when we talk about this is, well, why don't we just use Google Maps? And we've mentioned a few reasons before, which are that it doesn't do everything we want, and it's proprietary, and if we want to make changes to it, we can't, because it's Google software and they keep it tight. Some problems with using Google Maps in the USF area is that Google Maps can't find some of the USF building names or abbreviations, and it doesn't have data on sidewalks. So if you ask for walking directions, you will get walking routes down the middle of some streets because it doesn't have any sidewalks for them. There is, in fact, a sidewalk along there. And then you walk up a street where, again, there's a sidewalk, but it doesn't have it, and then it will route you crossing through this major intersection on campus, again, using the street. If you were to do the same trip using Open Trip Planner on the right, you'll get a walking trip that follows real sidewalks, and once you get to the boulevard section here, then it will take you across that on crosswalks and join you up with sidewalks on the other side and get you to the library. Open Trip Planner has options for routing and paying attention to the needs of people who use wheelchairs. So this is a route on one section of campus, again from the green to the red, and you'll see this red oval here that is highlighting a short stretch of stairs that exists along this route. So this is a route that somebody who can walk could use. But if you're in a wheelchair, you can't navigate the stairs there without getting off the sidewalk and into the dirt, and it's a little steep on the dirt, and it's you don't want to do that. So you can ask Open Trip Planner to find you a route that you can use in a wheelchair, and so it will find you a slightly longer route, but one that doesn't make use of the stairs. Now, to provide this sort of trip planning service, you're going to need data. You're going to need information on transit routes and schedules. You're going to need the street network and addresses and points of interest for geocoding. This is the term that's used for if you type in a street address in, say, Google Maps. It matches that to a location on the ground in latitude and longitude, and it's got some information in its files that it uses to do that. Or if you say, I want to go to the Tampa Aquarium, it can look up a list of points of interest and find a location for that. So you're going to need something that does that, because our expectations now, because of Google Transit or Google Maps, are that you can do this, and everybody knows you can do this. So any trip planner has to be able to provide that kind of service. You're going to need data on bicycling facilities, where the lanes are, the routes, bike routes if they're designated, and parking. You're going to want data on sidewalks, crosswalks, and other pedestrian infrastructure like traffic signals and pedestrian signals. And you'll want data on park and ride lots, car sharing, and or bike sharing stations if you have those in your area. And this is a lot of data, and it's going to take time to get the data together, and that's part of why we're having this webcast today. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. In terms of where you get the data, for the transit information, Open Trip Planner is designed to use what's called the General Transit Feed Specification, or the GTFS. More than 140 transit agencies in the U.S. have put their data in this format, and more than 400, almost 450 worldwide. The reason they did this is because this is the format that Google Transit uses. And if you are a transit agency and you do this and work with Google to to verify the data and everything, then you get a free transit trip planner from Google. But the nice thing about this is it's an open data format. Although Google was involved in designing this, it's completely open. Anyone can use it. Data in GTFS is used by a lot of mobile phone apps. It's used by Open Trip Planner, and it's becoming a de facto standard for communicating data about transit systems. There's a website called GTFS Data Exchange that lists most of the agencies that have GTFS data. What we found in working on this is that there is no single site, there is no single list that includes everybody that has GTFS data, but this is the most complete. You could also contact your local transit agency and ask them if they have their data in GTFS, and if they don't, the major transit scheduling software like Hastus and Trapeze that particularly large transit agencies use, the software has options that can take the scheduling data and prepare a GTFS format for it. So that handles the transit part. If you're, in order to look at sidewalks and bike lanes and some of the other things, there is a worldwide project called OpenStreetMap.org. It's like a Wikipedia for geographic data, and it's again, it's crowdsourced, it's open. Anybody can contribute data under a Creative Commons license. You enter data into it either by recording direct observations that you've made, so there's no copyright on that because it's what you've seen. There is some data that they have copyright access to that you can trace over, aerial images for, say, tracing sidewalks through a park. And if you have data that is not subject to copyright, if it's in the public domain and there's no use restrictions on it, it's possible to upload that information, that data, into OpenStreetMap as well. And once the data is there, anybody can download it and use it, which makes it really great for an open source project such as this. One other set of data, it's a standard data set called the National Elevation Data Set, and it has elevation data for biking and walking, and Open Trip Planner is set up to use this. And Open Trip Planner uses it to produce an elevation graph and uses it in some decisions about how to route bicycles. Now this is Florida, and it's fairly flat here, but there are places that could use this, and you would see real hills. Another source of data for this would be geographic information systems files, most likely from local government sources, so cities, counties, special districts, like parks, have files showing where the streets, the sidewalks, crosswalks, traffic signals, things like this are. What's available varies from area to area, and so you would need to check with your local government to see what data might be available, especially if you go into OpenStreetMap for your area and all that you see are streets. If you don't see anything that looks like parks or sidewalks or buildings, then you probably don't have many people working in OpenStreetMap in your area, and you want to look hard at whether you can get data from your local governments. So next poll question. Related to this is, have you discussed or obtained data from your local GIS agency? And it's just to get a feel for this audience as to how many of you have worked with this sort of data or tried to get it. And we'll give it a little more time here. Okay, and I think we'll go ahead and close that. So it looks like about 40% of you, whoops, lost the summary there. About 40% of you have talked to your local GIS agency, and have gotten some or all the data that you needed. And maybe about a third of you haven't had occasion to do this yet. And about a fifth had some other kind of experience with this. So it's a mix, and it's kind of about what I anticipated when I put the question together. Okay, let's move on. So what I want to do is talk about some possible applications of a multimodal trip planner, some settings and how you might think about putting data together and things that you might consider doing with it. So we'll go through these one by one here. One, and kind of an obvious one, would be having a transit agency or a metropolitan area have a trip planner for the area with information about taking transit and routing to and from transit within the area. This is something that perhaps the transit agency, perhaps the MPO, or maybe even the county or city government might decide to manage, because the transit data is crucial. The transit agency is going to have to be a partner, if not a manager of such a system. And most likely, for doing something at this scale, you're going to probably draw on a mix of data from local government GIS files and some crowdsourced data such as OpenStreetMap, in addition to the transit agency. There are a few examples of this kind of system that have been either put in place or are very close to being operational. One is Portland, Oregon. And as I mentioned before, TriMet was a key player in creating OpenTripPlanner. There's a lot of interest in the Portland area for having multimodal trip planning. And they had a transit planner and a bike planner, and they wanted to find some way of merging the two of them so they'd work together. They have been working with a prototype site, and they're going to release what they call a production site or a fully operational site using OpenTripPlanner later this fall. Being the transit agency, they've got their own GTFS data. They were instrumental in helping to create the standard in the first place. And they're using local regional data sets to improve the bike walk street data that's in OpenStreetMap. They have a fairly active OpenStreetMap community in Portland that had been putting data in there, but not comprehensively. And they're getting some regional funding to support this project. Around the world, the city of Pune, India, has put up a production deployment of OpenTripPlanner. And they had to modify this because their script reads right to left, whereas in the U.S. and Europe, most languages are running right to left. Left to right. So this entailed some rewrite of part of the code, and but it's an operational system at this point for their city, and it's focused mainly on transit, but it does other things too. Another one is Tel Aviv, Israel. They also use right-to-left interface, and what they've done is they put together. I don't mean to take away from it. It's sort of a quick and dirty launch. They put the thing together in about 4 weeks, and this was done in conjunction with major reorganization of transit routes in the area. They still, from what we've read, need a fair amount of work on some of the rest of the data, but in terms of helping people navigate all the changes to the transit system, it was a useful tool. And this just went live, I think, in the past month. City of Poznan, Poland is also working on such a system and has one operational. They've customized the website interface, but they use the guts, the behind-the-scenes part of OpenTripPlanner to actually plan the routes. Another setting, and one that we're particularly interested in, it's really kind of how Sean and I got interested in OpenTripPlanner, was to have such a planner available for our university campus, and any large, territorially large campus or one with a lot of buildings. You're going to have a lot of demand for something like this, where you could type in the building name or an abbreviation and get routes across the campus from where you are to where you want to get. There's a lot of interest here on the campus of having better integration of information with the surrounding community about biking and walking and transit between campus and off campus. Big challenge that we're having with this is funding. Budgets are tight, and everybody that we've talked to about this has been really interested in it, and nobody has any money at this point. So we're still, it's not here on the campus yet, but we're hoping. Something to be aware of with university campus settings is a lot of large campuses have their own bus shuttle systems, and while there are a few of these that have their data in GTFS format, you may need to work with the university to put the shuttle system into GTFS. It's not a terribly complicated system. Our shuttle system here has 5 routes, and we have a graduate student here who decided on his own that he wanted to learn how to create such a file, and so he did this as an independent project for the university shuttle system here. You may want to have more emphasis in this kind of system with integrating information about parking and visitor access. This is something that's being discussed but isn't yet part of OpenTripPlanner. If you do this, if you start talking to people on campus about something like this, expect a lot of interest in having disability accessible routing. You're going to need to collect and record data on stairs and curb cuts. And there's interest here at USF that if we get a system like this working, that they want to use it to prioritize improvements in infrastructure, so that if you've got a set of stairs that is just creating all kinds of extra travel on campus, that they can look at ways of routing or smoothing the stairs out, building ways around them. Another possible application would be a downtown or a district, sort of a brandable, recognizable district within a larger urban area. You could use this to promote commercial, social features within the area. Your local, the businesses and retailers in the area are going to be key stakeholders, and you may want to work with them to enroll them in reporting data on how to reach them by foot and by bike. You may want to work with nearby communities and neighborhoods that could benefit from some spillover from the downtown or the district. And you probably need to work with your local governments to get some of the GIS data for it. If you're in you could apply something like this for a TMA or a Transportation Management Association. You'd use similar sources of data, but you'd focus this on the members, so that if your members are, say, a couple dozen employers within an area, you might work with the employee transportation coordinators and the bikers and the walkers to map the cycling and walking infrastructure focused on each of the member employers. If you put a system together like this, you could work with each of the employers to feed in their employee address records, and you could get each employee a customized route plan for getting to work by different modes. Another situation would be an employer with multiple work sites, particularly large employers. Again, you're going to use similar sources of data, but and focusing on access to the work sites. Some large employers, such as Microsoft and Google, provide their own private bus service or their own shuttle service for their employees, and you would want to include those services in the system, again, by putting them into GTFS format and letting Open Trip Planner interline between those and the local public transportation agency. Again, you might want to focus on providing information so that visitors can find the site they need to get to and find parking. And again, working with walkers and bikers at each of the sites to collect data and identify the best routes for approaching the site. And here's just a couple of examples. The one on the left is large work sites for the Boeing company in the Seattle area, and the one on the right is sites for Microsoft with a big cluster over in Redmond, but they have some in Seattle and some elsewhere. And having worked with both of them, I know that having services for getting between the sites and making it easier for visitors to get to those sites is very important, just sort of part of their day-to-day doing business. One more example would be for supporting a program such as Safe Routes to School. Now, this is not something that we would anticipate an individual school would do, or even the school board. You might be built off of, say, a metropolitan scale implementation. And local PTAs, parent-teacher associations, and students might work to map the sidewalks around the schools, and then that information could be used to route students to the schools on sidewalks. So that's the break point here for the first part of this, and I want to turn this over to Sean, who's going to talk to you more about nuts and bolts and moving forward if you want to actually do this in your community. So I'll turn it over to Sean.
Yeah, this is Phil. Before we get to Sean, I wanted to just bring up quickly, you've covered a lot of information. I'm sure there are a ton of questions. Just to remind people how to submit a question online, click the Q&A at the top left-hand part of your screen, type in your question in this area here, and then click the Ask button. And then we will, I'll pull from the questions that are submitted to ask to Sean and Ed after Sean has completed. So let me take it back and give it back to Sean. Sean?
Thanks, Phil. So what I'm going to talk about here is to answer a few of the questions of what can I, as someone who's listening to this presentation, do for the community, and then just give a few overview issues of what we're looking at today. A lot of this has come out of the recent National Center for Transit Research project that was funded by the Florida Department of Transportation that was looking at different options for multimodal trip planners, and to do this in a cost-effective fashion. We do have a link at the end of this presentation to the full report, so I'll jump right in here to the next topic. So Open Trip Planner is available now, and then there always seems to be a but. So Open Trip Planner is still in the early stages. As part of our project to get an implementation running here in the Tampa, Florida area, it did require some people with fairly high-level technology skills and computer science background to get everything set up here. However, Open Trip Planner is progressing very quickly. As Ed said, the entire project is maybe around 2 years old. And as Ed showed earlier, there's actually, before TriMet in Portland actually got their system to full production, there's been a few other systems globally that have grabbed Open Trip Planner and run with it. So we're already seeing some movement from the prototype classification to production trip planning systems using the Open Trip Planner software and GTFS data and OpenStreetMap data. So in the near future, we expect that with the aid of some better developer and user documentation, that this will help lower the learning curve. And as we start seeing that and helping areas understand the relationships between Open Trip Planner and OpenStreetMap to help them get their data online faster, we're going to start to see a rapid rate of adoption. So this is really something we want to start thinking about now, because it takes, as Ed said, it takes a little while to get data together and to just have the communication that's necessary between the various portions of a community to talk about who has data, what's the quality of that data, do we need to supplement it, how do we bring all this together to actually create a system like OpenTripPlanner. So, what is really the first action steps you need to do at this point? Probably the first step is to categorize yourself with one of the areas that Ed just talked about, and then think about the different stakeholders that might be part of an OpenTripPlanner implementation for that particular community. And then have discussions with these stakeholders and find a champion that really wants to run with this, to promote it, and to talk about things like funding, where the system will be housed for the long term, and how it will be maintained, and how, from a funding perspective, that will happen as well. And agree on the target market. So who are we actually targeting with an OpenTripPlanner deployment? Who are the users that we see using the system? And then the application and the branding as well. How is this, is it going to be a default OpenTripPlanner implementation, or as we saw with the few other ones in India and Israel, they gave their own look to the site, and the OpenTripPlanner instance that TriMet is using has a TriMet brand on it as well. So then when you get to each stakeholder, so how can OTP help them? How can OpenTripPlanner help their community, or the people that they're invested in their particular needs? And then secondly, how can they prepare? So looking at things like data primarily, talking about what type of data is currently available today, what are the plans for collecting data in the future. All of this data needs to be maintained as well, and many agencies are on cycles to collect data at different times of the year, or different year cycles. So talk about what's missing. Talking about things like biking and walking, is there sidewalk data available? Is there bike lane data available? If not, how can we go about collecting that? Looking at OpenStreetMap as a possible tool. This is actually what TriMet's using, the OpenStreetMap and some of the tools there to integrate their regional data set into the OpenStreetMap data. So they're treating OpenStreetMap as ultimately their primary data source for OpenTripPlanner. So talking with the different stakeholders and talking about OpenTripPlanner and seeing an OpenStreetMap and seeing how these tools could help them. And then just kind of thinking outside of the box as well, not only who you should involve in discussions, but who could you involve in discussions, even possibly blending some of these different stakeholder groups together. So if you're thinking about a regional system, you could possibly even work with a local university to create a demo site, and this was the case here in Tampa. That as part of our research project with FDOT and the NCTR, we built a demonstration site for Tampa that came out of our research group here at the University of South Florida. So I'm going to talk briefly here too about some of the open issues. So these are things that primarily for the research communities to think about, but they will also ultimately impact some of the deployments of OpenTripPlanner. So these are some of the output of our research project as well. So one of these is talking about sidewalks and intersections. There's ultimately different types of cities. Some of them, and mainly in the core urban settings, have sidewalks are a norm. They're a default. So places like Portland or Washington, D.C., New York City, you can pretty much assume that in the dense urban core, there's a sidewalk on every single street. Here at USF, though, and when you get into suburban areas especially, that may not be the case. There may be many roads that do not have sidewalks. So right now in OpenStreetMap, there's actually two different ways to code that type of information based on what area fits you best. Because if you're in an area where sidewalks are the norm, you don't want to code every single sidewalk on every single street. It's just a lot of time and duplicate information. However, you need that type of representation in an area like USF where there's only a few major streets and many of the pedestrian paths are actually non-vehicle paths. This also gets into micromapping for intersections. So talking about things like accessibility, looking at how can we route people through an intersection, and preferring intersections that have some type of pedestrian signalization. So can somebody actually go to the stoplight and press a button and have the light change and have the pedestrian count down that will allow them to cross the street safely. And talking about how these different things should be coded in OpenStreetMap, and then ultimately how should OpenTripPlanner use this data. So just to give you an idea of the different data representations at a high level, this is actually what an intersection looks like when we explicitly code every single sidewalk that is surrounding the intersection. So this gives us things like a sidewalk walking up to an intersection, gives us nodes where we can code information like whether there's a sloped curve or there's tactile paving, and then the actual crossing itself of crossing the road. And we know where the crosswalk intersects the road, which we see here in the pink color. And then in this area is where we code information about the type of markings of this crosswalk, whether or not there's a signal at this location, whether it's just a simple stop sign, or even lack of stop sign for that matter, if that's the case. So these are all things that we need to consider when we look at the low-level details of how are we providing instructions to pedestrians to help them safely cross intersections. One of the issues too that Ed touched on earlier briefly, so the sparseness of OpenStreetMap data. The OpenStreetMap system itself is still fairly recently, and I believe the first major import of data for the US was in 2007. So there's still areas in the US where OpenStreetMap activity is fairly sparse. And the main contributors have been people that want to map their community and see those details appear online or be able to use the data for some type of purpose. And we believe OpenTripPlanner is somewhat of a game changer in this area that now OpenStreetMap contributions and the people that are providing those contributions can actually see the direct benefits of their work when they're using OpenTripPlanner. So, for example, if my neighborhood, I'm not able to route a trip in my neighborhood with OpenTripPlanner because there's no data in that area, I can actually go to my neighborhood, go out there, observe where the different sidewalks are, and then go into OpenStreetMap and record that information. And then when that data is updated then for OpenTripPlanner, I can actually then route into my neighborhood. So this is a pretty big benefit for people to actually see the direct benefits of contributing data to OpenStreetMap. And then we need to have a better understanding, or what are the current motivations and profiles of the US contributors that are active in OpenStreetMap. And finally, how can we leverage the knowledge of the profiles of the current contributors and understanding that OpenTripPlanner is going to have increased the visibility of benefits. How can we utilize that knowledge to actually get more people out there and coding information for their community? And how do we motivate the crowd essentially to help map their own communities for a more detailed OpenTripPlanner implementation that doesn't necessarily require the people actually implementing OpenTripPlanner to go out and map the information themselves. Another item that we believe needs some research is looking at things like crowdsourcing, how good, quote, good a road is for biking or walking. So more making decisions about telling people where to bike or where to walk. It would really help us if we had some type of traffic characteristics for the roads that we're telling people to walk on. So, for example, if it's a highway or if there's a high volume of traffic, we may want to prefer a side street that doesn't have the same amount of traffic. However, most of the current metrics that are collected, things like traffic volume or the width of lanes for a road, are fairly difficult or dangerous for a member of the community to just go out and observe to record an OpenStreetMap. So you don't want someone to actually go out in the middle of the street and measure the width of a lane just so they can go back and record it in OpenStreetMap. And this information, some of it's collected by the departments of transportation, but the information may not be available on smaller roads, or it may be outdated depending on how frequently it's collected. And their main purpose is not with a bike and walk often on a particular road, but looking at the road level of service. How well is this road serving vehicles? So what we really need are better objective metrics to define bike and walk level of service, or even you could call it quality of service. So this is essentially the measure of how good a way or a street in OpenStreetMap is for biking or walking. And we need that metric to be easily recordable for a casual observer. So this is something that someone with a pad and a pencil could just walk outside, easily see something from a distance without having to walk in the traffic or having to spend an entire day out there counting vehicles. So another open issue is the issue of personalizing bicycling directions. So when we're collecting these level of service metrics for how, quote, good a road is for biking, we eventually have to present that information to a user and make some type of judgment of whether a particular road would be good for a particular cyclist that's using the website, the OpenTripPlanner website, and whether they would be comfortable using that particular route. The problem is that this can be different for every cyclist, depending on their level of expertise. Some expert cyclists would definitely be comfortable riding in higher traffic roads with higher traffic volumes, where other beginner cyclists just would not be comfortable using. This also depends on the level of infrastructure that's in place to support biking. So is there a bike lane? Is it just a shoulder on the road? Is there actually no shoulder and you actually need to ride in traffic? So the question is, what does an ideal user interface look like to meet everyone's needs, but not be overwhelming? So we don't want 50 different controls and options displayed to everyone that comes to the website, because it may be overkill for many users, and it's not something that contributes to the simplicity of the site. But on the other hand, we need to provide some type of customizability to allow different users to get the type of route that suits them and their level of experience. So then another question is, should we actually be customizing these routes that we provide to OpenTripPlanner users based on some type of self-assessment or skill or comfort level? This concept also comes into play when you're talking about wheelchair users or using OpenTripPlanner for other people with disabilities. So different types of wheelchair users, or even individuals with disabilities that use some other type of mobility device, such as canes. Everyone has slightly different needs, and incorporating this into the website into the OpenTripPlanner system is something to think about. One last issue here is the issue of missing infrastructure. So in this case, our data set is complete, but we actually don't have the physical infrastructure to support walking or biking in an area. And what do we do in that situation? Do we provide people pedestrian directions where really there's not a complete pedestrian network? Or do we just provide no directions in that area and wait for a full deployment of sidewalks and bike lanes before we actually route people to those locations? And we actually see this in the USF area as an example. We have the Bull Runners, our campus shuttle, and we have stops on several streets surrounding campus, either that don't have marked crosswalks and even have limited sidewalks. And this is a map of USF campuses here in green shaded in the center, and the purple line is the transit route. And there's several situations north of campus. There's actually only a single crosswalk on this entire loop. And there's also incomplete sidewalks along the northern portion, and also routes that reach into the southern portion of the community south of USF campus. Same situation on the east side of USF campus. There's really only one useful crosswalk on this entire road, which is a fairly extensive road. There's also a lot of student housing east of the campus. And there is a crosswalk at the northeast intersection here, but it actually doesn't connect to a sidewalk. It just goes into the grass. So deciding how do we want to present travel information to users when we don't necessarily have a complete pedestrian network is something to think about as well. So I'm going to give a quick slide or two here on the current status of OpenTripPlanner, where it is today, and some of the other things that we may see in the future. Definitely one of the biggest efforts right now is the fall 2011 launch of OpenTripPlanner for TriMet, and they're actually switching over to OpenTripPlanner as their primary production trip planning website. So there's a lot of effort going into that and cleaning up all the loose ends and polishing OpenTripPlanner into a full production website for Portland. There's also Open Plans, who I mentioned earlier, is a nonprofit company that's started supporting different communities and their interest in OpenTripPlanner and actually deploying OpenTripPlanner if communities decide to go that route. They're actually talking to a few other cities as well about OpenTripPlanner deployments, so we expect to see a few other OpenTripPlanner deployments popping up in the fairly near future. One of our students at USF, Marcy Gordon, is part of one of her independent projects that she did for her own studies was to implement an OpenTripPlanner Android app. So this is something she's currently working with some of the OpenTripPlanner developers to get this into the main OpenTripPlanner repository. So this again will be an open source app that anyone can build on, and this also means that there will be an Android app for anyone who deploys OpenTripPlanner in their community. Something else for bicycle users, talking about customizing for bicycle different preferences. There's a bicycle triangle, which is a nifty little user interface feature that was implemented by David Emery in an A-Train trip planner as part of a bike and bus trip planner in Atlanta. So this lets you mix based on a triangle where you have things like topography or elevation, you have distance, and then facility type, so the type of infrastructure available, and lets the user balance that to see, do they want to travel a longer distance, maybe just to stay on the official bike infrastructure, or are they willing to shortcut their route to take some unofficial paths to get there. So there's some discussions of integrating that into OpenTripPlanner as well as a number of general system and routing improvements as part of largely the OpenTripPlanner launch in Portland. Some of the things that we think are very interesting that OpenTripPlanner is looking at now for some of them on the long-term roadmap is something, so OpenTripPlanner could actually be used as a analysis tool. We have a routing engine that tells us what's the best path to get from one place to another using a variety of criteria, and we have the data to route on. So this could actually be used to produce a lot of information for communities to determine what's the local access to transit, what are the different community resources that we can get to using biking or using public transportation, and kind of a predecessor to this are some may be familiar with the walk score or transit score sites. So those are looking at things primarily just unimodal, and OpenTripPlanner actually has the capabilities of expanding this into multimodal and looking at how transit can help communities, as well as drive some research analysis. So talked with Andrew Bird, one of the OpenTripPlanner developers, who's looking at relationships of housing prices and transit access. So some really interesting things that we're just starting to see emerge from the OpenTripPlanner project is using it not as a customer-facing trip planning tool, but more as a research a tool for policymakers and analysts to be able to understand how transit and alternate modes of transportation affect the community. Another thing, thinking of how do you create and maintain transit data sets like GTFS, OpenTripPlanner has some thought of using that as a data management tool. So we have a full web-based user interface that uses things like GTFS for transit data, and how could we possibly use OpenTripPlanner and leverage some of that existing software to help agencies maintain their own transit data sets. Things like interregional deployments as well. So this is looking at a larger, almost district level area where you're integrating multiple different players that each want to manage their own data sets. And kind of a microcosm of this is USF campus, where USF is actually split over 5 different campuses. So being able to have a centralized website that everyone goes to and knows is the USF website, but actually let each campus individually manage their own data sets, which all kind of gets sucked up into this larger OpenTripPlanner instance for USF. There's some thoughts of how to modify the Open Trip Planner system to incorporate something like this. And Open Trip Planner does currently support regional deployments, but it's more of a single provider approach. So then to wrap up conclusions from today's presentation. So these are things, what should I really take away from today's presentations? What are the things I should be thinking about tomorrow? One of the biggest things we want to encourage you to do are to start discussions with your different stakeholders today. So think about who would be involved if you were to launch an Open Trip Planner instance. Think, what category do I fit into of the ones that Ed talked about earlier, and or even if you're cross between different categories, and determine who you need to start conversations with now. And then getting your data together too. So this is part of the discussion with stakeholders as well. Figure out who has what data. Does your local transit agency have your data in GTFS format already? If so, that's a huge major step towards Open Trip Planner. Looking at the OpenStreetMap community, has there been mapping in your local area? If not, are there individuals, such as one thing we did here at USF was get the GPS class and the geography department involved. So as part of their student projects now, students go out and actually map the community in OpenStreetMap versus prior to OpenStreetMap, everyone kind of had a single data collection, and then the data kind of died after that particular class was done. So thinking about innovative approaches of how can we encourage the community to map in OpenStreetMap, and what are the different players that would want to do that. And then finally, on the data end of things, data sources, talking to your local agencies, that may not be just transit agencies, but departments of transportation, MPOs, who has data, and what formats are those data in right now, and can we actually bring those together to support an Open Trip Planner implementation. Finally, think about the benefits of open data and software as well. Open source, there's a lot of resources out there to look at. Some of the benefits, no vendor lock-in, you can have access to the software and data without going through the vendor, it's open. If you want to just go in there and change something, you can without having to write up a contract. Free apps, if you use something that's on the standardized side of things, such as we saw the open source Android app that's being produced for Open Trip Planner. These are things that kind of come along and are value added to the core trip planning software. And then reduce consequences of failure too. This is something it's really a community supporting these efforts. So the software, instead of just buying a single license for a proprietary product, deciding you don't like it and going back to the drawing board, there's really a community out there that you can all benefit from each other's knowledge of what works, what doesn't, and then also leverage the software that other people have produced. And when we look at things that are multimodal as well, think of parking ride lots, car sharing, and bike sharing. These are often in some cities new options that haven't been available before. And think of bike and walk as part of a trip as well, not a whole trip. And with those different properties together, you can really stitch all those things together to give you a true multimodal trip planner for your community. So I think that wraps up our presentation for today. I think we're going to go to some questions now. We have the project website that I mentioned for our FDOT and NCTR project up now, and Ed and I's contact info.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Ed. We already have several questions in the queue. I know we're running a little over, so I'll take the ones in the queue. At the end, we'll pull up a brief evaluation. We'd ask for those if you'd hold on to do that. We will be applying for certification maintenance credits for those that are AICPs. We don't have approval right now for this, but if you fill out the form and we subsequently get approval, then you will receive credit for this. You can also see the recordings of this. It will probably be on the website tomorrow, the same website at Cutter, to find the connection info, and you'll see a list of about 10, 15 other recordings that we've had, including which ones are eligible for continuing maintenance credits, certification maintenance credits too. So, all right, with that, first question is, have there been any paratransit programs studied or included in studies in conjunction with a transit agency for multimodal projects, where paratransit was considered one of the modes?
This is Sean. I'll take a shot at that one. To my knowledge, not in the context of something like a multimodal trip planner. To my knowledge, at least, paratransit is traditionally considered a separate approach, just because it has things like reservations in advance and some properties that don't fit the same mold as some of the other modes. However, I do think that some of the technology could definitely be used for that. That's there in OpenTripPlanner. Maybe that's something to think about in the future. Is how could we actually leverage something like OpenTripPlanner to help planning for paratransit trips?
Okay. Next question is, have you looked at Google's Map Maker tool that is also used as crowdsourcing update of map details to enhance existing trip planner in Google Maps? How does that compare to OpenTripPlanner? And then there's a follow-up question.
This is Sean again. I'll take that one. So the Google Map Maker has been something that's been in use internationally for a while and was just recently introed into the U.S. And it does have a web-based interface that's very similar to OpenStreetMap that lets you add new streets or drag them around to do different modifications. The downside is that all your edits that you create with Google Map Maker stay inside Google Maps. There's other than going to the Google Maps website and seeing what you've done, which is nice to see, but there's no way to pull that data out of the system. So Google essentially owns all of the contributions that you make, and they're as to date, at least, they're not willing to share any of that data that you're contributing to the system. So OpenStreetMap differs in that all of your contributions are going out to the community, and it's an open data source that anyone, including yourself, you can go back and pull down all of the data. It's all fully routable that you can actually use in something like OpenTripPlanner.
All right. What I'm trying to add to the page, too, is you're talking that apparently the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State has produced an application that routes bikes based on traffic stress, and I'll put up the I'm just going to put up the URL here on the page for those that are would like to view that. So there we go. Thank you. Next question is, can OpenTripPlanner generate accessibility maps like walk score and transit score to see where improvements are needed?
This is Ed, and I'll take that one. You can do that, and that's some of the research applications that Sean was talking about, looking at the relationship between transit access and housing values and so forth. Actually work with, in effect, taking distance, computing trips between all origins and all destinations, and then extracting information about that, about each trip, and putting it into a map. So you can, once you have your own trip planner and the data to support it, you can run it however you want. And as I said, one of the things that we found here on the USF campus is that the facilities planning department, which is in charge of buildings and sidewalks and so forth, wants a trip planner like this so that they can make a comparison between a default route and a route that's accessible by wheelchair. And if the route that's accessible by wheelchair is much more circuitous than the walk route, then there's something for them to look at as to what could they do in terms of investing in the pedestrian infrastructure to reduce that circuity. You could, using that same information, you could find areas of the campus that are more accessible to wheelchairs or less accessible to wheelchairs. But it's all in having the power on your computer system to be able to generate all the routes that you want with all the characteristics that you want, and then pulling out what you want from that.
All right, thanks, Ed. And last question for today is, what is the potential to integrate real-time traffic, construction, and weather info into OpenTripPlanner?
This is Sean. I'll take that one. That's a really excellent question, and that's something I didn't have on one of the earlier slides, but there is some thought going into that. I think that would definitely be a huge thing for a lot of people that are looking for that type of information to be able to have in OpenTripPlanner. It gets complex when you're talking about computing routes based on real-time constraints, because you can't, one of the things that has to go into account when you're pre-processing data before making it public and serving it up via OpenTripPlanner to make trips fast, so you can just go to the website, click, and get an instant result. We have to pre-compute a lot of different variables and metrics. So when you can't do that beforehand and you have to do that in real time, it makes the routing much more complex. However, there is some work going on. Some work out at UC Berkeley that they had a TRV paper that was looking at integrating real-time estimated arrival times for buses into transit trip planning. So there's definitely some work out there, and I think that's something that hopefully we'll see people starting to work with OpenTripPlanner as a tool to investigate different types of algorithms and implementations to do that. So it's something that I think is kind of on the horizon right now and is definitely feasible in the future.
All right. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you, Ed and Sean, for your excellent presentation on the OpenTripPlanner. And as I mentioned, if you take a few minutes to fill out the evaluation, we greatly appreciate that. And the recording should be available tomorrow on our website. Go to www.cutr.usf.edu, and you'll also see which the recordings we've had and what upcoming topics we will have. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.